Welcome back to Military Brats podcast.
We're your host. I'm Chloe.
And I'm Juliana. We are welcoming our guest, Gracie, today. Gracie, would you like to give yourself a little introduction?
Hi, guys. Yeah, sure. So, my name is Gracie. I am a Army brat. My dad served for just under 12 years. I was born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio, and then we moved to San Antonio, Texas, to Fort Sam Houston when my dad was injured in Afghanistan in 2011. And then when he retired in 2014, we moved to Cape Coral, Florida, where I kind of spent all of my teenage years up into now. And I went to college here at Florida Gulf Coast University and graduated with a bachelor's of science in health science and a minor in marketing. And then I have gotten or I'm working towards a master's in marketing with a concentration in digital and social media at the University of Alabama right now. And I'll be working towards a master's in journalism and media studies after I graduate in May. So, and then, hosting my own podcast, starting a social media marketing business, and, all sorts of fun stuff. So,
Oh,
little
wow.
snapshot.
Yeah, you're a busy gal.
Yeah, it never stops.
So I know you gave some background on your childhood, just a tad, but I was just curious about any siblings.
Yeah, I have one younger sister. She's 15 months younger than me. So we're both really close. And, it was helpful having a sibling in the military lifestyle for sure.
I bet it's like, yeah, your built-in best friend, right?
That's what I always say. Yeah.
On our Google form, you said you and your sister were both deployment babies. Can you explain that a little bit more for our listeners?
I'm gonna kind of backtrack a little bit, but my parents got married 4 days after September 11th. It was a planned wedding, everything, and my dad was in the reserves at that point, and they both had civilian jobs, and they were working in downtown Cleveland when 9/11 happened. My mom was pregnant with me at the time, and my dad was just placed on 30-minute recall. So he had 30 minutes. He had to have his bags packed, um, and he had to be within like a 30-minute radius of his unit if they were to call and say, hey, like, we got to go. So thankfully, the wedding still happened as planned. He had, I believe, a groomsmen or so who had been called and deployed already, but he was thankfully still here 2 weeks later after the wedding. However, he was deployed stateside, thankfully. And so, even though he was still in the United States, he was still on a deployment. And so I was born during that deployment. Thankfully, we were able to call the Red Cross. Well, not we, because I was not involved in that, but thankfully the doctors were able to call the Red Cross so he could be there when I was born. But I was born in the middle of a deployment, and then my sister, like I said, 15 months later, this is a second stateside deployment now. She was born during that deployment as well. It's kind of crazy to say.
What are the odds? Both of you guys were born into a deployment situation. Where was your dad at
I
during
know.
this time?
So for me, I believe he was in Missouri. Um, and then for my sister, I believe he was in Kentucky. I may have that backwards, but it was one of the two. So we were both stateside. Thankfully, he wasn't overseas. So it was easy to
Mhm.
get him, back to Ohio when we were born.
How was that for your mom? I know you might not, I know you were like just being born and things like that, but just like thinking about your dad being deployed while, she was like going into labor and things like that. What was that impact on your mom?
Yeah. So from what I know, it was definitely hard because, my parents had just gotten married to, 2 weeks before my dad left. So they didn't get, much time together. And my mom was pregnant with me. So it was that, you know, she had something that she had to work for. Like, she couldn't just, you have that two sides of it where you could just like lay around and, be sad and heartbroken that you have your parent, your loved one, your spouse gone. Or, you could get up and live your normal life. And so I was kind of, that motivation of, okay, well, life's not over. Like, I'm having a child, but I could not imagine having two under two, and being a single parent at that point. And it's definitely had to have been a challenge for sure.
Yeah. I think that's so interesting to think about is like even like for military spouses, even if you are still with, your military spouse, even when they're deployed, like you're pretty much a single parent or a single
Yeah.
spouse. And that's such a wild concept for some people to think about because it's either you're just a single parent, but now you're a single parent, but you're still in that relationship. So how do you kind of juggle all of that?
Right, because you hear the term single parent a lot, but you don't necessarily think of it in the way that it applies to the military life. And then when my dad had his, after he had his break in service, he got out for a little while, and when he rejoined and went on the last deployment, my mom still had to do everything. We were 8 and 9, so it was still a lot to handle. And it was back to that single parent role. And she had a job, she was working in the schools. So then her schedule would be the same as ours. So when we'd have a day off, she didn't need to, find a babysitter or something because she was working a 9 to 5. It's still challenging going back to that single parent role. And then it's very transient, trainings come up, TDYs, deployments, everything.
No, I agree. I grew up with I'm the oldest of five, and
Oh my gosh.
I don't know, my mom, well, I'm the oldest of seven, but I lived with my mom and my stepdad, and there was me and my biological brother, and then my mom and stepdad had three, but there was three under three. So she was like in a whole
Oh,
different state
wow.
raising five of us by herself majority of the time.
It's a lot.
It's yeah, it's such a juggling act and it's such a challenge, especially like thinking about like I'm sure every parent kind of gets used to having, the dad or whoever it is like on deployment. They kind of get used to like juggling everything on their own. So thinking
Right.
about the transition for that parent coming back into that role, how do they fit in into the family again, and how can they like make it work? And I'm sure it's a lot easier to figure out since you're having two parents now, but it's still something that's challenging.
Yeah, reintegration is seriously the hardest thing. And while I didn't have to go through that process, post deployment because of my dad's injuries, it changed a whole lot. It was reintegration in the caregiver, role. But still, it's, that something that you constantly deal with of somebody coming back from a deployment and
Yeah.
having,
Did you want to
yeah.
touch base a little bit more on your dad's deployment and his injury?
Yeah. So, like I mentioned before, it was 2011 when he deployed. And he deployed to Afghanistan and he left in about August or September. We He left in August to go to Fort Dix in New Jersey, and then he got a 4-day weekend pass, so he was able to come back for a few days. And something that we didn't realize how vital this would be to our story, in the moment of it happening. But the last movie we saw as a family was Dolphin Tale. So, uh, yeah. So that was the last movie we saw as a family. And if you're not familiar with the movie, during the well, I guess the whole plot of the movie is winter, and she got caught in a crab trap, and she ended up having to have her tail amputated. And so crazy. And then fast forward to 3, 4 months later, uh, my dad ended up stepping on an IED. So we were at Sam's Club and, getting stuff for a care package to send over. We had just spent hours upon hours with a friend making Christmas cookies because, it's November. You've got to think months in advance if you want to get a care package out, in time for Christmas. And so we were working on that Christmas package. We baked tons of Christmas cookies to send over to my dad and to the other soldiers deployed, and we were at Sam's Club getting our last few items. So we were getting all sorts of things. And then the next thing I really remember is standing in my house. We were unloading groceries from the van, and the phone rang, and my mom answered the phone and dropped to her knees, like screaming, crying, sobbing. I had no clue what was going on. Like, words were just flying everywhere. Like, tell me
Mhm.
he's alive. Like, and I'm just like in shock. 9 years old. I have no clue what's going on. You always saw the, okay, knock at the door, then something's really wrong. But, you never really got a phone call to find something out, um, to find out something's wrong. And so, but we were a reserve family. There was a ton of different situations going on. So we got a phone call, and from there it was just that, kind of rush feeling. My sister and I grabbed, like, there was a laundry basket, we got our backpacks, we got everything we needed for school, and we left. We went and stayed with a good friend who happened to be my sister's kindergarten and first grade teacher. She had, been her teacher. We became good friends with that family, and we were, kind of removed from the situation pretty quickly. Just because there's a lot going on when something
Yeah.
like that happens. And so this was all unfolding on November 20th, which was a Sunday. And the following Thursday was Thanksgiving. So we did not see my mom again until that day. And I remember her sitting us both down on the couch and telling us, "Do you know how Winter lost her tail? Well, Daddy lost his leg." And that was kind of the way she broke it to us, because, I mean, how do you tell an 8 and 9 year old,
Yeah.
catastrophic injuries have happened to their dad? And that was one day she was on the phone with my dad, who was, in Germany. He doesn't remember uh, anything really of what happened, but he told her, if a dolphin can do it, then I can do it. And so that is then how she was like, oh my gosh, that's how I'm going to
Yeah.
tell the girls what happened. And that's how she told us. And, we cried for a little bit. We got it all out. But then, we had some other friends there, and we were like, oh my gosh, well, Dad's going to get a flipper like Winter. And, started to kind of turn such a tough situation into a, I guess, lighthearted moment, and um, kind of start making the best out of it, because that's what, throughout the, almost decade, or no, it's been uh, we're going on 12 years now. November will be 12 years. And so over those 12 years, it's like you've had to make the most out of every situation you're given. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons from this. I was in a very bad school district in Ohio. We were funded by levies. And if the levy didn't pass, then your school didn't get funding, because our schools were tax funded. No art, no gym, no library,
Oh,
no
wow.
electives. So it was really the bare minimum. And so, really it's finding the positives. Like, we didn't have to deal with that. We ended up going to a military school on base, where we
Yeah.
had so many different options that we were able to learn so much from, and then having the best friends. And then, coming here, like, I would have struggled throughout college, to fund college, if it weren't for what happened to my dad, because we were able to get scholarships, um, which, thankfully. But, there's a lot of pluses and minuses to every situation you go through. So it was really the learning to look at the good aspects. And yeah, you may be an amputee now, but we figure out ways to go around it. We figure out those pluses and minuses.
It sounds like your dad was very positive. So I think, from what it sounds
Yeah.
like, so I think that was probably really beneficial for
Yep.
you and your sister and your mom.
For sure. I think a lot of it was just positivity bouncing off of each other, because we all
Mhm.
had to find ways to be positive in our own ways. And then, it would encourage the rest of us to be positive as well.
And that's just like such a hard thing for you to understand at such a young age. So I love that your mom played into the whole dolphin tail thing, and with especially that being like the last movie that you saw together as a family. I
Yeah.
just really love that. And honestly, I don't know if you could tell, but my eyes were like starting to water up when you told that story because I can only imagine like just like seeing your mom at such a vulnerable state, especially when you know, like that's your mom, you put her on such a pedestal, like she's such a strong woman and things like that, like she's taking care of me on her own, she's pretty much a single parent, so like seeing such a strong figure in your life being so vulnerable in that moment is just super heartbreaking. And I love that you guys really did come together and think of it as a very positive moment.
I think if we didn't do that and we didn't find, dolphin tail, like we something as simple as that, brought us to a deeper understanding of the situation that we were dealt with, I don't know what would have happened, because I mean, how else do you tell your daughters that their dad was just, catastrophically injured? But I had never really thought until this moment, like, what would have happened if that was not part of our story. But
Yeah.
Everything happens for a reason. I guess Dolphin Tell was your
yeah,
reason.
yeah, the day that my dad got injured, each year that passes by, that we call that his alive date. And so that's the day where he should have died, but he, stayed alive. And so that's the day you celebrate. And so every year, we've tried to make something positive of it. That first live date came around and we went to Disney World and we celebrated. And like I said, it's Thanksgiving week, so it was a good time to go to Disney, anyways. But we also rented a car and we drove down to Clearwater to see Winter. And so that was such a fun experience. We didn't get to see her again before she passed, but we did, make the most of that experience. And, we were able to actually see her, which was just, incredible to see and actually be there.
Yeah, that's such a full circle moment and I love it. So how was it? How was the transition from kind of going from like a daughter to a caregiver, especially at such a young age? How was that for you?
It was so challenging because it was, you see someone you love so much going through so much um, pain and struggle that it's like you can't, you come to a conclusion that you can't do anything about it. It's just the way it is. And so that was really hard. I was very fortunate that there, because we were at San Antonio, we were at Fort Sam. Brooke Army is there. So we had a lot of other kids going through the same thing of, a parent having disabilities and injuries of some sort. So, I felt very supported with my friends. Um, but still, it's to that point of you had to relearn, what to do. Like you had to relearn a new routine and, what your parent needed, because you have to mature at such a young age. And I think military children mature at a much faster rate to begin with. But then, being a military child caregiver, that's a whole other added pressure on it. And, we had to learn certain things of, okay, it's not asking, do you need help? It's waiting for them to say, hey, I need help with, this task. We spent a lot of time in the Fisher house, which, is a big house with 27, I think our Fisher house like had 20 something rooms in it. Um, and so each of those rooms were filled with a family that had a wounded service member in them. And they were there for the hospital and to be there. And they, had different disabilities and situations they were facing. And so we were able to bond with them on a different aspect and that level. Um, but I wasn't just exposed to my dad's injuries, I was exposed to so many other injuries that, it was a shock. And so seeing that, at maybe 9 years old, is definitely, heartbreaking
Yeah. Wow, that must have been so
too.
hard to see at like such a young age, and like I couldn't even like imagine like kind of understanding that at that age as well. Kind of like just being able to wrap your brain around it and being like,
Yeah.
so many people are going through the same exact thing that my dad is going. Maybe it's not that they've, you know, had a similar injury as he did, but still, they're still going through their own challenges. And it's something that I think a lot of people sometimes forget, that people in the military are actually risking their lives doing what they do on a daily basis. And I love that you're bringing so much awareness to that right now, because it does need to be talked about a lot more.
Yeah. Even still to this day, there are still injuries that happen. There's a lot of training
Yeah.
incidences that have been happening, um, where injuries are still happening and deaths are still happening.
Yeah.
And so it's something that's never ending.
Did this incident ever affect you wanting to join the military?
Oh, 100%. Um, I After that, I was like, "All right, I do not wanna join the military, I don't wanna be in the military." For a while, I wanted to be a pilot, and, we were traveling so much after the injury and the incident that, I was a frequent flyer. I got used to being on planes, and so I just wanted to be a pilot, and I wanted to be a pilot for Southwest. And my parents were like, "Well, if you wanna be a pilot, then go to the Air Force Academy. Like, they will pick you up instantly. You are a female who wants to fly, like, they will pick you up instantly." And I was
Yeah.
like, "Oh, nope, don't wanna be a pilot anymore." Like, I do not wanna, be in that situation at all. And I didn't even wanna marry into the military for the longest time either, because just the fact of knowing that this could happen to my loved one, my husband, like, not happening. And then I had a about a year-long relationship with a Marine, and I'm like, I want this lifestyle. Like, I want to marry into the military now. But it's
Mhm.
that thing of you see how rewarding it is, how traumatic something can be and how hard a lifestyle can be, but it's so rewarding in the end. And it's not for everyone. There are so many people I know where it's like you would not have made
Mm-hmm.
it as a military child. And I hate to say that about people, but it's such a taxing lifestyle. And I think, it requires the right type of person. And obviously, we grow up in it. So we are kind of trained to fit in the lifestyle. Um, but it does require the right person to become a spouse or to join the military. And it's in the very very back of my head to join the military. We'll see if it ever happens. I'm not sure if it will or not, but it is back there. um, but I would love to marry into it and be able to experience the lifestyle, uh, kind of over again. I got kind of cut off from it, I guess.
Yeah.
It was everything happens for a reason, like you said, Chloe. But um, I would love to be able to experience the full lifestyle, and I think it's such a rewarding lifestyle that I would love it for my kids. Um, but if that's not in the cards for me, then that's not in the cards for me. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of military men out there. I'm sure you'll find someone.
Yeah, you can always explore different branches too.
Exactly. So, I mean, we'll see what happens. We'll see how it goes, but you never know. Everything happens for a reason. But I think for a while it did have an impact on whether I wanted to join the military or wanted to marry into the military. And, you know, as you grow older,
Yeah,
your views change a little
for
bit too.
sure.
So,
I don't know. I think growing up in the military teaches you a lot of like skills. We're very resilient. We're adaptable, even if it's not
Mm-hmm.
as long as we've grown up in it. Even
yeah.
8 years. You know what I mean? 2 enlistments. I still think it teaches you a lot at a young age.
Yeah, I think it really does, especially with the deployments. It kind of
Yeah.
teaches you to be very independent and to know that you can really only rely on yourself at the very end of the day. Like, that's one thing that I really live by that statement. And it's not to say that I don't like love and adore my friends and things like that, but at the end of the day, you really only have yourself And that's something that I learned through the military, I think.
Yeah, because everything comes and goes. Everything's so transient in the lifestyle that, it's you, and that's the bottom line.
So I know you touched base on you going to the University of Alabama and that you've already graduated with your bachelor's and now you're on to getting your major or your master's, which is just absolutely amazing. Can you tell us a little bit why you chose that degree in social media and marketing?
Yeah, so while I was working on my undergrad, I was already about 2 years ahead, and I did not wanna graduate 2 years early. I did a lot of dual enrollment in high school, so I got a lot of credits out of the way. And, then I would just fast tracked it, like, I did 5 classes each semester. One semester I did 6. I always took 3 summer classes, so I was really moving along quite quickly. Um when it got a little closer, my advisor was like, "Okay, so if you wanna stick this out at least another year, then you can add a minor on." And so I went back and forth between marketing and journalism, and I took my first marketing class and I just fell in love. And like I said, my bachelor's is in health science. I wanted to be an athletic trainer. I wanted to be a sports medicine physician. I honestly wanted to work for the WWE and travel around with them. And then I was like, all right, well, that's just, I was at the time supposed to be marrying a Marine. I was like, I cannot be a military spouse and be, on the road with another company and, um, uh, be a doctor. Like, that's just, I would have to relicense everywhere I move. And that just sounded like the biggest headache. And because I had fallen in love with marketing, I was like, this is what I want to do. It's too late to change my major, really. It was too late to double major. I would still be in my undergrad right now if I did double major. And that just was not happening. So I just kept going with it. And I said, all right, I'll do a master's. And so I had been volunteering with the Travis Mills Foundation since September of last year and doing marketing and journalism with them. And I wrote with Eagle News, which is my undergrad school's Florida Gulf Coast University, their student led newspaper. So I wrote a ton for them. And then I also took little internships where I could get them to do social media and learn more about it. Um, and so when I got into my master's, I was so excited and so prepared for it.
What is the Travis Mills Foundation for people who don't know?
Yeah, so the Travis Mills Foundation is a organization that was founded by Travis Mills, and he is one of 5 quadruple amputees from the Afghanistan Iraq wars. And so he was one of the just a few to survive his injuries. And so instead of, sitting around and getting bitter about it, he decided to get better and give back. And so he coined the term recalibrated veteran. And so he didn't like the term wounded warrior because he didn't want to be viewed as just wounded warrior. Like he got better, he recovered and moved on. And so he coined recalibrated veteran because he got better, he recalibrated, and now he's giving back. He opened a retreat in 2017 in Rome, Maine, and so they bring up wounded warrior or recalibrated veterans and their families to the retreat in Maine. They fly them up for a week, and you're able to do any really activity that you could imagine. They have kayaking, they have paddleboarding, they have archery, they have those are some of the summer activities, but then they have snowshoeing in the winter and so many other different winter activities that are adapted to fit any injury. And if it's not adapted to fit your injury, I promise they will adapt it for you and find a way for you to do it. If you want to, nothing is pressured. You don't have to do something if you don't want to. But it's just a nice kind of getaway and escape from your injuries and your day to day life.
I know, that's
That
amazing.
is. I also love the term recalibrated veteran. I love that.
Yeah, that's what I use that every time now. I don't like wounded warrior now either. So
So, what's next for you? Do you have anything in store for the next upcoming months or the next year? Anything big coming up?
yeah, so I would say the biggest is graduation. Um, I am a huge Star Wars fan, so um, we graduate the weekend of May 4th. So Star Wars Day, May 3, 4, and 5 will be graduation. So I'm hoping that my ceremony falls on May 4th. But that's really the biggest thing that's coming up. And then, getting out into the workforce. Everyone asks me, that same question of what's next. And I'm like, I really don't know, but I can tell you it's something with military families, something with marketing, social media, digital media. Like,
Hmm.
I don't know what it exactly it's going to look like, but it's going to look like something like that, hopefully.
We are curious. Before we ask you about your podcast, do you have any advice for military brats out there listening?
um, you know, it's such a hard question. I always ask it on my podcast because, why not? But it is such a hard question to answer. But I think one of the biggest things that I would tell a military kid is, find who you are. You have so much out in front of you, you have so many different opportunities, and, take each one as it is. And if you don't like being at a certain duty station, then fine, don't like it. But, make the best of it while you're there, make friends. Um, you could find your lifelong friend, at the worst place that, what you feel is the worst place in the world. But like we said earlier, everything happens for a reason. So I think just kind of
Yeah.
really be in the moment and live through that with that mindset. And, you'll be
Hmm.
golden. Like, don't let one situation get you down.
I really love, yeah, I really love that piece of advice, especially like even if you think it's the worst duty station ever, because that's exactly how I felt when I was stationed to 29 Palms. And probably the best thing that came out of that was that I met my best friend, Chloe. So yeah, just
Yeah.
really try and make the most out of any situation that you're in, because you never want to just like kind of shut yourself down and close yourself off from like other amazing opportunities that could have happened, if you did put yourself out there. So I think that's really great advice,
I
Gracie.
agree.
Yeah. Don't miss out on something just because you're upset about something,
Mm-hmm.
If that's not the truth. But let's talk about your podcast. You are a fellow podcaster, so share with everyone listening more about that.
Yeah, so it's called Grace of a Military Child in Life. I launched it in April 2021 in Month of the Military Child. And then I relaunched it in August 2022 and included military spouses in it. So really just the foundation of it is sharing stories and experiences, the highs, lows, everything in between of military children and military spouses, of, what it's like for them being a military dependent and how it goes. And so every week, 2 episodes air, one on Tuesday featuring a new military child or maybe a returning military child. I have had people on a few times, which is always fun to see, the progress in their life, even if they're, in college and graduated or whatever and into the adult life. And then on Thursday, an episode with a military spouse airs. And so it's really fun to get to know other military um, children and spouses and the community of military and sharing resources because there are so many military spouses and military kids out there doing amazing things. So it's important to share all of that. But yeah, it airs Tuesday and Thursday. It's called Grace to a Military Child in Life, and you can find it on every single podcast streaming platform.
Yes. Well, you heard it. Go check out Grace's
Yeah.
podcast. And me and Juliana did just do an episode, so stay tuned for that.
Yes. Absolutely.
Well, I guess that wraps everything up. Thank you so much for coming on, Grace, and sharing your journey.
Yeah. Thank you both so much for having me.
Of course, we would love to have you on again. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
As always, if you have any feedback, questions, or suggestions for us, please feel free to DM us at Military Brats Podcast on Instagram.
And if you're not already, please follow us on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and our Instagram at Military Brats Podcast so you don't miss an episode. See you next Wednesday.